Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here inside this container is a bunch of prepared bedding, stuff that I'm getting ready to use at some point soon, not today, but at some point soon I'm going to be moving worms out of their current homes into fresh new homes, and I wanted to have some nice prepared bedding kind of aging and getting ready so that at some point soon I could use the material to build up a couple new containers. The worms that I intend to move into this stuff soon are presently in their old containers, undergoing what I refer to as horizontal migration, which means I took one end of the bin, set it up nice with some fresh food and bedding, trying to motivate them to exit the finished compost that they reside in. So I just figured, since this stuff was up here on the bench, and since it is pertaining to the systems we're going to check in on today, thought I'd show it really quick. But I'm going to get this out of the way. We're going to get those two worm bins that have the migrating worms in them up here, and we're going to get those systems replenished with more fresh food, fresh bedding, to try to help that migration continue on successfully. Possibly even take measures to see if we can reset the coverings in such a way that the finished castings start to dry off a little bit, further motivating the worms to move out. All right, let's get working on this. So now to get the job done, I've got some potato peels as well as some chunks of pumpkin here. And the two bins that we're working on are up here on the bench already, so let's start revealing what's going on down here. These paper coverings that we're using right now, I thought I might actually use those as supplementary bedding. I don't think we're going to need a whole lot, because we did build the feeding areas with a fairly large quantity of bedding, of which I'm sure there's probably plenty of leftovers still, but I thought it would still be a good idea to include a little bit of fresh bedding, and possibly the best fresh bedding you could use is bedding that's not even so fresh, but rather bedding that's been in the bin for a while. Does that make sense? And then to replace these top covering pieces of newspaper, I've actually crafted a few replacement pieces of newspaper with which we can try to cover up at the end. So the only danger of moving these pieces of newspaper to the side is that I'll forget about them. Alright, so before we dig in to see how the migration's progressing inside the feeding areas, why don't we just take a quick look through the castings material to see how the depopulation, or the exit of the worms from the material, is progressing. Wait, the exit of the material from the worms? Alright, sorry, strike that, reverse it. The exit of the worms from the material is progressing, and it does look to me like it's progressing quite nicely. I mean, I do remember these bins as being fairly heavily populated, so when you would just kind of dig in and start looking through the stuff, you would usually encounter a fairly huge number of worms no matter where you looked. However, so far I'm seeing only scattered worms here and there. That could very well mean that the majority of the worms have already zeroed in on the fresh bedding, fresh food that we set out there for them 10 days ago. Let's just, I still like the idea of giving the material a little bit of a stir, because that would help bring some of the more damp material that's down low closer to the surface, where it could possibly air out a little bit more and dry off. And then, but then again, you know, the material even out here on the surface has a pretty good moisture level to it because of those plastic coverings. I thought that the plastic coverings might get replaced at the end in a way that maybe the majority of this would be covered by almost paper only for the most part, and that would definitely help this stuff, you know, start to dry off a little bit better, and then you know, further motivate the worms to leave. I'm just trying to be kind of careful here, because it does feel like I'm very near the rim of the container, and it wouldn't take much to send a whole big bunch of this stuff just flying over the edge and onto the floor or onto my shoes. Stuff like that. So I am trying to be careful not to allow a quick slip of the hand to end up making a huge mess that would take me a while to clean up. Just an ounce of prevention sort of thinking here, but definitely like the way this material looks. I wish it wasn't so clumpy, you know. I just wish it were all ready to flow and break apart very readily on its own, just under its own weight, versus needing to get busted up a little bit. But I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there if we allow the stuff to dry a little bit. You know, as long as we're tilling up and digging and everything like that, since we do want to add a little bit more bedding and some fresh food, maybe we can even slightly increase the size of the feeding area if possible. It's not terribly important that we do so, I don't think, but if we could, why not? Although, I don't know. The jury is still out on whether I'm going to try to make that happen. I guess mainly because of the fragility of this little divider, this feeding zone partition that I put up here. The main reason for that is typically just to protect these nice finished castings from getting all kinds of debris mixed into them. And I usually perforate it full of holes to make it really easy for the worms to pass through this stuff. So yeah, maybe we'll just leave it where it is and not worry about, you know, trying to increase the size of the feeding zone. Let's do a quick stir up and examination of the material over in this container here. The way I set these bins up here on the bench is that the older one is over on this side, and this is the younger one. The younger of the two bins is what I affectionately refer to as my original worms. And I mean, my first impression from digging through this stuff is that, first of all, it feels much more damp than the material in the other bin. And possibly because of that, I'm seeing quite a few worms still hanging out in this stuff. I still didn't get the memo that there's a nice fresh pile of bedding and food over right there on the other end of the bin. So especially in the case of this system here, I believe it would do probably do a world of good to let this stuff start drying out a little bit and leave it uncovered. At least, you know, not covered with plastic, covered only with paper, which would allow some of the moisture content of this system to start escaping through evaporation gradually. And I gotta tell you the truth, I wish it was not so damp. I almost wish that I had started this migration in such a way that this bin would have been left to actually begin drying 10 days ago. That would have gotten us a little further ahead, I believe, in terms of worms depopulating the castings than we've achieved so far. But whatever. What's in the past is in the past. Best we can do is look forward and try to figure out how to improve things going forward. So let's see. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring back these top coverings, because even though we're going to use them in the end to rebuild the feeding zone, I don't want to accidentally litter these finished castings with all kinds of little scraps of paper or anything. I mean, the only stuff that you see here out on top so far are larger chunks of paper, but there is some shredded paper with which I built the feeding zones, the horizontal migration feeding areas. So if we were to try to excavate a little bit here just to see how things are progressing, then we are going to be handling some shredded paper, which I'd prefer to keep isolated from the nice finished castings. So yeah, you can see we're definitely making progress over here as far as depopulating the finished castings. I mean, there's worms everywhere in here. There was all kinds of berries and fruits and stuff put in here last time to try to motivate the worms to come over. It does seem like it did a pretty good job, from what I could tell, getting the worms to come on over onto this side, so that at some point soon we can get them hauled out of here. Now what I'll usually do when I reset my feeding zones like this is I will try to at least nudge all the material inboard so that I can create the replenishment section on the very far end. So I think I'll just do that right here as long as I'm at it. And then, I don't know, this piece of paper can go right back in here. And then this is the piece that we're going to also use down there. So why don't we just use that as the foundation for the food that we're going to be dropping in momentarily. But before we proceed to that, why don't we also examine how the migration in this system is progressing. First of all, let's just get some of these larger pieces of paper out of our way so we can more easily examine what's happening down here. All right, well, it does look to me like this system has also done quite well in terms of its worms making their way over into the collection area. It also seems like our bedding is holding up pretty well. So I think just by adding those old top covering newspapers as just a little boost to the existing bedding that's already in here, I think we'll still be okay. We don't need to add a whole bunch more. Just by adding that one little extra piece, I think we'll be in good shape here. So let me think here. How did we do this before? We took all this recycled stuff and chucked it in there, and then we also took this piece of repurposed top covering paper and put it down there as the foundation for the food as it comes in. Very nice, very nice. And now we can split up the portions here. So we'll, oh my goodness. I'm not even sure it's necessary to try to chip all this apart, because this pile of potato is pretty solid in terms of how it's frozen together. Maybe we'll just position the potato dead center, and then I believe that these pieces of pumpkin should dislodge from one another a little bit more easily than the potato. For some reason that potato really did sort of freeze together. All right. I mean, I didn't see any signs of the old food that was placed in here 10 days ago, and that's not too surprising, because it wasn't a whole lot, and it was stuff that I kind of assumed would get eaten pretty fast by the worms. So I think we've got a pretty fair and square distribution of the food items over here. I guess the only thing I'm a little reluctant to do is just to leave the food like that uncovered. So maybe we could just backfill with some of this existing bedding that's floating around over here nearby. I know some of the worms that are inhabiting that bedding that I just pushed over the freezing stuff are probably not too thrilled about getting placed on top of a bunch of frozen stuff, but they can just make their way off there if they don't like it. Yeah, this is these little partitions that I put up here, perhaps not the best material. This sort of single layer cardboard. Usually I'll use like the corrugated multi-layer cardboard, which definitely holds up so much better than this stuff. This stuff is almost completely disintegrated. So I think we're starting to get to the point where we can cover up. Usually I want things to be somewhat level before I do that, so let's see about leveling things. Things over here look pretty level. I guess over here too. Gosh, so muddy. I really wish this stuff were not so damp. But whatever. We'll get it there at some point soon. Yeah, okay. Let's get some of these worms that are crawling the walls back down into the system. That's where they belong, not on the walls. And, all right, so I thought that these pieces of paper could be arranged sort of like so, providing fairly thorough coverage. Perhaps a little bit of spaces over here where they can actually air out even better. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe the better way to do it would be like so, where we've got very good coverage, but with paper only. And then this one can be over here. And then the plastic will be put on, but not in such a way that it covers as much as it had previously. It'll only cover the feeding zone thoroughly, and then just a little bit of this side to allow for some drying over on this end that's closer to where I am. So how does that look? Let's see how the top covering plastic would work out now. I guess I do want the I definitely want the feeding zone to be very thoroughly covered. So something like this is what I had in mind right here. I mean, in fact, it would be almost nicer to have less of the finished castings covered so that more of the moisture can escape off of it into the air. So let's do it like that, and then I think we'll be pretty close to being finished here. Bring this one over, and let's see, how did we have this oriented? We just folded a little bit of the bubble wrap back this way, made sure that it went edge to edge, corner to corner, all the way around, and only covering up a little bit of the finished casting side of the bin. So I'm not in a particular rush to see this come to an end, but it does seem like the majority of the worms have made their way over into there, and we could definitely probably arrange a haul out the next time we come in here. So in preparation for our next check-in, I'll probably have to have a couple worm bins all set to go so that we can actually start hauling worms out and relocating them. And then we'll probably need to also do a reset on the feeding zones to allow this migration to continue and finish off and allow these castings to be fully depopulated. So I've got almost everything here ready to go. The only thing left, I suppose, is for me to get stuff cleaned up and put away, but you know, I'm not going to waste your time with that. That stuff's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.